to 5 Steps in Becoming Globally Competitive. I am your host for this afternoon, Nadia Bai Thomas, Director of 800 Tech. And before we move forward, I would just like to extend my apologies for my co-host, Schofield Thomas, Managing Director. Unfortunately, he was pulled away at the last minute. Today was an emergency. But that's perfectly okay, because here we are this afternoon, moving full speed ahead with the training phase. This is my esteemed guest, Ms. Charlene Pedro. Charlene is a corporate trainer, human resource consultant, personal development strategist, speaker, and mentor. Charlene has over 25 years of experience in the human resource management sector. Founder and Chief Engagement Officer of Conventus, Consultinc. She's also the founder and Conversations Over Coffee with Charlene Pedro, a successful breakfast training program. Welcome, Charlene.
I am super excited, to be here. So I am grateful and thank you so much for that warm and gracious introduction.
You're most welcome. So as most of our listeners know, we have been over the last, I would say, month and a half, going step by step through the 5 steps of becoming globally competitive. We have covered the strategic phase, the planning phase, the scoping and budgeting phase, and then we dived into implementation. Implementation was a bit heavy, Charlene, because we wanted to give our listeners and our audience, our viewing audience, an exposure into the different digital transformation tools that existed, as well as the importance of project management when you utilize digital transformation, when you engage in any project for that matter. But now comes a very, very important step, which is the training phase. We now have our software in there. We now have whatever platforms we have, and we have to train our staff in readiness for excellence, for productivity, for efficiency, and of course, most importantly, to ensure that the organization is globally competitive. How do we begin? How do we begin that training process, Charlene?
Well, many times we tell our and project leads that we need to train the people, as you say, to use the software. But that's just at the let's say, the conversational level. But we really want to step back and ask ourselves what really needs to be learned. Yeah, and this is where your training needs assessment comes in. So training doesn't start with saying that someone needs training or there's a need for training and what we're going to train, what will be the topics. Training really starts with taking a step back, taking a strategic bird's eye view of the organization. So not just as we're implementing the software. So whereas it will be natural to ask yourself what training is required to use software, I will even step back a little bit more and ask myself what other training, which may not be in your remit, but what other training may be required now for staff to effectively use software.
Excellent.
Give an example. Let's say accounting software, for example. If we are training our team members, if you're training your clients to use accounting software, but there's someone who's just joined the organization and may not be at the level required to participate in that training, then obviously that person needs to do some more homework before they can fully participate and be engaged in training. So that's just one example. And your needs assessment should flag that for you. Yeah. Your needs assessment should flag the level of your potential participants, and it should flag what specifically are the needs to be trained. And when we're talking about needs assessment, like I said, you take a step back from a strategic level, a bird's eye view. So that's on the organizational level. And then you want to ask yourself, as I shared with the individual now, so which individuals need to be trained and at what level? Because they all may not be, as a matter of fact, I can assure you that they all will not be at the same level, yeah?
I completely agree.
And experience, yeah? And if you do recognize, well, we do need to train everyone, and therefore the challenge for the trainer is to design a program to address everyone's needs which will be at different, So the challenge for the trainer will be to ensure that you are engaging everyone, the newcomers who are now learning, and the experienced participant who has been there, done that. How do you keep both participants engaged in your program when they are opposite ends of the spectrum? Yeah. So we spoke about, go right ahead.
Sorry, so how long would that needs assessment process take before we can actually get into the physical training component?
It need not be long. Many times when we think about projects and work to do, and if we do research, we will be overwhelmed also. If we just focus on what we're trying to accomplish and keep it simple. So your needs assessment can be a questionnaire. You send out a survey to your participants, your potential participants, your organization. Your need assessment could be conversations. You have your notepad, and you know what questions and what you want to uncover, and you have a conversation with the manager. If it's a small organization, you have a conversation with the manager over some coffee, over some lunch. Don't make it strenuous or tedious. I always say people keep it simple.
Keep it simple. But it can be formal or informal.
It can go formally. You can do up you could construct your document, and you can administer to the organization, let them respond, you can get an idea of what is needed. Another source for assessment can be individuals' performance management document, the performance review document. Depending on what your training is, but that is a good source.
So they can create that linkage between the two.
Who needs to be trained? That's right, because training doesn't happen in a vacuum. We need to train people. Training should happen because it helps the organization fulfill the strategic goals. It takes the organization one step to strategic goals. It makes achieving the strategic goals a little easier because people are now skilled and now have the attitude and the willingness. And I'm sticking that in because it's not about skills only. Can bring the horse to water butts. So it's more it's equally about the willingness to utilize your skills. Many times we see that people participate in training, but to implement what was taught, what was supposedly like pulling teeth. So all that has to be delved into, brought into the picture at the beginning of the process. At the beginning of the process.
Tell me something, Charlene, because what I have found useful when I do training is allowing the employee to actually use live data. And the reason why I would tell them bring in live data is so that I can really give them a clear distinction between this is your current process, this is how long it takes, this is how labor intensive it is, etc., etc. Now with this very same data, we're now utilizing it in this with this new process that we've implemented, whether it's a new re-engineered process or it's a technology that we're using to create a vehicle for efficiency, for them to actually see for themselves in a very meaningful way the difference. And I've found in quite a few instances that helps with the whole buying in of the concept of, okay, I want to be trained in this. I want to make sure that I can just get my work done faster. Not so much about being efficient for some employees, yes, but more about just getting their work done faster, getting in, getting out kind of thing. Do you also find that to be a helpful tool in your experience?
Well, what you have just shared with us and described for us, one of the principles of adult learning. Because adult learning tells we must let well, I don't like to use the word student, the learner, let the learner drive the process as much as possible, and the learner must be able to implement what's learned back on the job. And for that to happen, is to use, as you say, live data, is to use real life scenarios from back at work where they're doing your for other kind of training, if you're doing role playing or role plays, and if you're doing what I call little practice sessions, the best way to use that, as you say, live data and live situation scenarios from work. So that is part of facilitating for the adult learner.
Understood.
Expects that what they will learn, they will be able to implement it immediately.
Gotcha. But have you found any other techniques equally as beneficial in terms of getting the learner to be more excited about the whole training process?
To me, that's big. Of course, you have, but for me, training and just supervisors, of course, that also is part of experiential learning. So if we can learn by doing as opposed by being passive learners, if we can be active learners in the process, in times when we're not using live data or scenario, if we structure in programs so that participants are active participants and not passive learners, and that will definitely make a difference when somebody has finished the program, whether they will say, wow, that was worth my time. When you ask that question, that one question that trainers ask as the litmus test for their program, would you recommend this program to someone? That's the litmus test.
Yes.
So your goal as a trainer is for everybody to say yes and another yes.
Ideally, right?
Absolutely.
But I want to ask something, because you're coming in as a trainer, you've done your needs assessment, but I know when we spoke before we came online, you were telling me a lot about having this social contract. Can you explain a little bit more to our listening audience? What is a social contract? What's the importance of having this social contract?
Okay. So when I refer to the social contract of training, when we design our training program, when we design we are making a commitment to all learners that this is what we deliver. And therefore, that's your social act. And what that means is that as you design your program, you must keep going back, because you should have designed your objective based on what the needs assessment and what you're trying to achieve. So your objectives will come from your needs assessment. When you have defined your objectives, which should ideally set under 3 criteria in terms of what they're going to do, under what conditions. So your objectives must be measurable as far as possible, but it must be measurable. So once you've defined your objective, this is now your commitment. This is now your promise to your learners. This is what I promise you will learn at the end of this program. Gotcha. And I had mentioned that because I was reviewing, somebody had been into review, and there was an objective line training program they were constructed, and there was an objective. And as I went through the outline and the program and the slides and the script, but nothing spoke to that one objective.
Okay,
and I was a bit bewildered.
Yes.
That's right. So you have an objective that you're going to learn X, Y, and Z. And when I went through the slides and when I went through the script, nothing spoke to the objective. And there was another situation where there was a one-liner for the objective. And I said, again, this is your commitment. So therefore, you need to build on it. It has to be more than a line. It has to do. So when we're designing training, we must always, I use a spreadsheet. And I have my objectives and what the content, just a note, what the content will be, what the evaluation method will be, of course, my slide numbers, so any exercises, activities, experiential activities. So I have that in a spreadsheet. So I know that all will be, so I know all objectives will be covered at the end of the program. So there's always like into ourselves that when we are deciding that we cover all objectives as we declare to the social contract I was into, so that we ensure as trainers that we deliver exactly what we said we will deliver.
But another question I have for you, we were talking about doing assessments. You can do an assessment at the end or an evaluation at the end to determine your success as a trainer and how well the information was assimilated. But you also mentioned to me that along the way, you can also do that. Would you recommend you do it after each module? Is there a particular time frame when you do the intermittent assessments?
So as you assess everything, and you don't have to assess everything. What you want to assess is going back to your social contract. Yeah, what you said you did is what you want to assess, because that is what is important. So we may have 3, 4, 5 objectives. You may cover 10 things in a program. You don't have to assess 10. That's the 5 objectives. That's your promise. Yeah.
Okay.
As you're doing your assessment and module for those 5 only. Those 5 only. Sometimes we have so many objectives, but you don't have to have many objectives. You can have a few objectives, like a 5, 7, 8. But you ensure that you assess those objectives, because by assessing, you know the learner learned. Yeah?
Yes.
And you can, in the various modules, that's right. So we're not just training sake and to tick the boxes. Yes. We're not training because it's something that we have to do. Something that's on our planning document, our project document, and it's not about ticking boxes. If you really want to do meaningful work and make an impact, as I tell people, you want to leave a legacy as a professional, we have to go and make sure that what we do delivers and makes a difference.
It resonates.
So if you're as you can do your assessment, as a module, or you could do it at the end of the module. If you are asking, if you are going to do the layout of tables, yeah, let's assume you're doing that, and it's a particular way to lay out cables. You could, for example, ask them to do a fun diagram and present it to you. And that assessment as whether they know the different designs. So that right there is an assessment. Yeah. So we just have to look for creative ways. Assessment isn't like a test, a written test. We just have to look at creative. We can assess whether what we taught has been learned and understood and can be. Awesome. So that's a simple example. That could be a fun, make it fun. You know, drawing maps is another thing. The trainer for Hermat a few years, about 3 years ago, and of course the program, the learning is that you will be able to design a program, technical jargon and requirements, and you'll be able to base again on the requirements. And so that was the highlight assessment. Will deliver a short training, 8 to 10 minutes or less. But it was the same one if they didn't plan as required, you know, as required, as required. Yeah, that they have the objective defined. So that was an example of assessment. We had people showing you how to make paper. We had people showing you how to cook. So it was just a process that was important and not the what. You know, what was the topic. So you could make your assessments during your sessions and on what it is at the end of the session, but it should always be something that is engaging and fun, no matter training. You can always make it fun.
Well, I like the sound of that. I definitely like that. And what I know from my experience, my own personal experience, is that when you are now asked literally to set up your own construct of a training program to, in essence, to retrain what you've just learned. You learn more because now you have to look at it from a different perspective, as opposed to someone receiving the information. But how can I now disseminate this information in multiple ways? Because as you know best, all of your learners have a different level of understanding and a different way of receiving information. So, and this lends me a little bit into the different types of ways that we can train, because you just spoke quite much about the concept of the train the trainer program, where you train and then they build a program and then they extend it to the rest of the employees in the organization. But I know there are the one-on-one training programs, the group training, OJT. There are quite a few. How do you determine? Is it that the organization determines the type of training that they want applied? Is it that you make that determination? And if you do, how do you make that determination?
Yeah, so usually, but before I get to that question, mention about the types of learners.
Yes.
So about it, so that people learn differently. So what we call the VAC, the visual, the auditory, kinesthetic. So people learn by visual, some people learn by auditory, some people learn by kinetic action doing. So therefore, our training program is designed to facilitate the different learners.
Agreed.
Yeah. So hence why our slides should be engaging and not a slide full of words, but pictures, bright pictures, full screen pictures. Your slides should set the tone and tell your reader what you want them to feel. And probably a few pointers to prompt you if you wish, but it really shouldn't be your the entire notes on your slide, because your slides are really to facilitate the learner. Yeah.
Okay.
And
understood.
So you always make sure, your slides are ready for you,
well,
slides are not for you. So sorry to break that news.
I'm not an expert trainer, so for me, slides were prompting me what to say. But okay, now I know.
Prompting too. Prompting as a heading, and probably 2 points. Mostly my slides are full. Screen slides to tell what I want you to feel, because it's not just about our knowledge, it's not about the brain. Training is also heart training. If I want you to feel a certain way, I'll put you to feel that way, and I will take you on a journey. Yeah. I may have a pointer or two to actually to prompt me so I'll know what to say. But our slides are really for that visual learner, to help that visual learner. Yeah. And that's why also your voice is for those who need to hear, intonation and how you speak will be very impactful for those who need the voice and the music. Well, depending on what you're training, like if you're training, will need a little Mali or Bunji.
If I'm hearing you correctly, Charlene, you're saying when you're training, there should be, it's almost like you're tapping into all of the sensories to ensure that you can really cue into all of your audience that you're training. Is that what you're saying to me?
Yes, absolutely. Because again, we're not training to take boxes. Objective of training is really change behavior, which starts in. So we have to connect with on a personal level. I mean, though I will never come in, even if it's technical, something technical, I'll never come in and start to talk about supervisory training. We have a leadership training. So we start with doing your values, because it's never about the technical. It's about the individual, and for the individual to have an aha moment and say, aha, I want to make a change. And that's what training is about. No matter what we're training, So it's always important that we connect with our learners and not just think. It's so different from teaching. I shouldn't say so because teachers do delve into their learners, but how we may perceive teaching, some of us perceive teaching. We must connect with our learners. That's the only way learners get to trust us. That's the only way our learners will sit up and pay attention and want to be there. I make the statement that I know your manager sent you here. I know your company sent you here.
Which is normally the case.
I make those statements,
Yes.
I say, I promise you that there's something you'll learn here today that you could take away for life, that you could use in your personal life, be grateful for. When I say that, people start to sit up, it's not about the company. And I tell them that, I had a session last week, and I said to them, you could put do not disturb me, though I know they're going to disturb you to write some checks or to sign a document, but this is your time. Tell them I said so. This is just your time to focus on you. So that's usually my approach.
But that's, I want to jump into, I'm seeing a couple of questions. I'm seeing a couple questions coming in, Charlene, and I just want to jump into one that kind of ties into a little bit what you're talking about. And one of our audience members is asking, what is the benefit of storytelling during training? Because you were talking about that connection you need to make with your learners. So they're asking, what is the benefit of the storytelling during training?
Okay, and I would ask, do we like to look at movies? Do we go to the cinema? Do we go to movie town? Is that an out? Do we look forward to going to the cinema? When we're in training, you are unsure. You are unsure. And by telling stories, all the time, we just say I have to document them and have it in a catalog. But they just come to me depending on what I'm sharing, what is the topic. But for my story, I love to tell them because it allows you to make an emotional connection with your participants. If they can see themselves in your story, it's a win-win. I have told stories, and you, what should I say? You, with your voice and your pace of speaking, I have told stories and pause, and I know everybody was just at the end of the seat. I kind of smile because I tend to look at the privilege and the power of telling a story. So storytelling allows you to connect to the audience in a deeper way that just sharing data cannot, because we are all social creatures. COVID has taught us that. We are all social creatures. I miss the hugs, We're all social creatures, and we all connect at an emotional level. I remember I did a program, and after that, so many people, it was like a short show, I should say short show, virtual show. And so many people contacted me about my story and how they felt, and of course what they were seeing wasn't what I was seeing, and how I'm so strong to be what I'm doing, and I'm so inspiring. And that was just from telling a story. And as a trainer, I've learned, before I used to have a guard on my story. I will tell so much and no more. But I've learned that the deeper you go, the deeper you touch people. And that's where the connection is. Yeah,
and that's where the learning begins as well.
Yeah, that's where the learning begins, because then you open the door first, and if somebody can connect with what you're sharing, they may not have your story, but they can vibe with the emotion. They felt that way at some point in time, or even if they connect with what you're saying because they bring the emotion forth and feel with me. Feed me, even if they did not go through the identical thing. So I have found storytelling to be very powerful, to the point now, depending on the program, I say when you ensure that you tell this story. So beforehand, I'm planning that you will tell this story during your presentation. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the main connection. Yeah.
I have another question for you, Charlene, coming in from another member. How often do you follow up after training, and how do you go about doing so?
Okay, that's an excellent question. And why I'm saying it is because, many times organizations managers feel training is the plaster on the sore. Yeah. Training is the end result. Training is the solution to all our performance problems, which may not necessarily be so. Hence our needs assessment. So when we do have training, part of that process, that cycle, is to ensure that you check back with those who have learned. Yeah. And that is what we will call now, you have your assessments, and this is now the evaluation of the training. So you can check back depending on what the topic is, because you should be able to know what time is required for simulation.
Okay, so the timeline will vary.
Yes, it can vary. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Now, as a trainer, you should have that up front, and then after you're wondering, when should I check it? That's part of your planning up front. Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's part of it, that you say, we're having this program on X day, and I will be checking in on X day. Yeah.
Gotcha.
What is the check-in? Yeah, what does the check-in looks like? So for evaluation of training, we have different levels. So the first level will be what we all know as the reaction level, what we call the happy sheets, the back forms. That's the evaluation at that time, how they felt about the training.
Gotcha.
That's it, happy sheets. And evaluate the learning. So that was the reaction level. And this is based on the Kirkpatrick model for evaluating training. So your happy sheets are the reaction. You want to go to the next level, which is the learning level. You want to evaluate whether they learned what social contract. Yeah.
Yes.
Did their knowledge increase? Yeah. Did their knowledge increase? To do that, simple way to do that is, from social sciences at UE, if you did any of those social rams with pre-test and post-test. I can't remember the name of the course per se. We have learned how to do our surveys. Actually, the name of the course was survey something third world dynamics or something to that effect. We learn how to do our surveys, our pre-test and our post-test. So it's the same with learning. One simple way to do it is do a pre-test, the same survey. You do it before training and you do it after training. And then you can show increase in knowledge. Yeah. And you want to ask questions specifically to what you want to learn. This is not a question, was the food good or the surroundings good or the trainer good? Specifically to the knowledge and skills you want to evaluate. You can do that, and you can also do interviewing or observation. And this is a tricky part because you must get managers of the participant board before you train. Big gap organizations and trainers do not address. We need to bring managers in the process before we have the training. We need their buy-in. We need when, now they might say, you go training and you're so excited and come back bright eye and bushy tail. And when you come back, it's same old, and there's
you
no
have changed, but your
way
manager still, is doing the same thing.
That's right. And everybody else still, you go to customer service training and they come back all excited. And everybody know when they want tomorrow. So the environment hasn't changed. So what the manager has to do in that situation, the manager has to prepare to receive you from training. They have to be able to allow you to implement what you have learned. And how can the manager do that if the manager doesn't know what the objectives are, what you did? There must be part of the process. That's a big gap I think we miss a lot, is putting the manager as part of the process.
We're going to take one more question, Charlene, and then we're going to wrap up. The last question is, how difficult or different has it been to train workers with since we are doing most training online, especially as it relates to digital transformation?
Well, I'm actually digital transition part.
Well, I can speak to that part, but I know
speak to that.
I would like, yeah, I would speak to that part, definitely.
So for virtual training, I mean, of course, I'm doing training virtually for clients and for myself as public programs. For my clients, some who visualize, conceptual, and understand that so it's a shift in the first place. Before you start to have the conversation of look like, you have to have that shift that it is possible to be effective equally virtually face to face. It's not the same, but it can be equally effective. For the trainer, that means you have to pull out all the tricks from your toolkit. That means you have to recognize the attention span of your learners. I've seen training virtually at the whole day, and I say, heaven help, train for a whole day, tiring virtually. You know, and I do that, you know, most times for training, I stand for the entire period. So virtual is a different tax on your mental capacity. So I'm having what I limit my clients training to 4 hours. I usually say 3 more. For me, I go to no more, you know, per session. And during that session, we have to ensure that our participants are not passive observers in our session, because we're going to lose them, whether they're on the screen on or off. You know that idea. So I always encourage, if bandwidth can update, I always say come prepared for your cameras, so no PJs, please. So I tell the organization beforehand. And I also ensure that I have something to engage each module every 15 minutes.
Yes.
Research tells us attention span 15 minutes. The new tells us it's a goldfish. I guess it depends on who's doing the research. But we have to build in our training activities, and activities for training could just be fingers, type in the chat.
Yes.
Yeah. And for virtual training, you need to come out with your guns from get-go. Don't think you're going to build up momentum if you're trekking up the hill of virtual training. You need to come out firing from get-go.
What I can tell you, Charlene, is everything that you have articulated, it's absolutely no different when you're doing digital transformation training. From your points, even when we now started where we were talking about the sensories, because if you don't sound excited about what you're talking about, you're already losing your audience. I definitely encourage cameras on. I keep asking questions to keep them engaged, and I'm a little naughty because I know your name. I would call your name and say, so Sophia, what do you think about this? And so what? So that way you don't know when your name is going to be called. So you keep, you know, being engaged, and you keep being interactive, because you don't want to be called and be So I'm a little naughty that way in doing things like that. And definitely one of the things I do is, after I show them how something is done in the digital space, I say, okay, I'm going to let you share your screen now. So I unshare my screen, and I call a name, and I have them share their. So now you got to get on there. And so with you not knowing, it forces you, okay, I got to pay attention, because I don't know when she's going to call my name. So it's a little bit of a naughty trick, but it's a way to keep them engaged. But one of the things, Joe, and I don't know if you've experienced this, I tend to do smaller groups in the virtual space than I would have done in the physical space. I don't know if it makes a difference on your side, but for me, especially as it's software. Sorry? You said something, Charlie?
How do you define small?
Small might be like about 10%. 10 persons.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I really
So,
want them
I
to
understand
interact with
that's
the
digital.
application. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. If I understand that is digital because it's hands-on. For me, for supervisory and leadership training, do 2025. I wouldn't go more than that. And that is to do face-to-face also. I don't go more than that because, again, there must be interaction and they have activity assignments.
Yes.
So I make my face-to-face as much as possible. Do groups. So I use the breakout room. So you do have your groups to do and will report back and come back as a team.
Gotcha.
So for me, so I managed to 20, 25, if the numbers push it, but I would go more than 25. I've found that some people are quiet because of personality. Don't call out persons because I know people are different, right? But I mean, people silent, what you have recognized is once you put people in those smaller groups, those mid groups, people come alive. The quiet ones, so the entire period, and you put them into those smalls of 5 or 4, and then they come alive. And that's the most vocal person to give feedback in the chat, or one person message me directly. Fantastic program. Said absolutely nothing in the in the whole class, in the big class, but that person was the most fantastic program that ever did. So I recognize and I lean in where people maybe learn differently and therefore have different models and different modes for people to what is comfortable for them. Yeah, what's comfortable for them.
Excellent. Thank you so very much for this education this afternoon, Charlene. You've given us so many pearls of wisdom about training and the process behind training. And it's not just get in, get out, and it's definitely not check boxes. So we are most grateful for you joining us this afternoon. I'm excited, Charlene, because you were telling me also that you have a leadership program tomorrow. Can you share a little bit with the audience for us before we close off?
So today's a crazy day. Today's a crazy day for us. The whole week has been crazy because we have been getting a lot of last-minute registration. Actually, I had one person who messaged me and said they want to register 5 persons from the organization. Then she emailed and said, okay, I have 2. And then last night or night before, I checked my email late in the night, 9 o'clock, at 7. So it's a program that people are excited. Yeah, it's a program people are excited about, and I think it's because of our approach. So we'll be a better leader, and it's me recognizing over the training leaders, working amongst leaders, consulting among leaders, the different styles and approach people use and the impact on them, whether positively or negatively. And I found that many times we go on training and we do fancy foreign Harvard training, yet still we come back to the office and some of us are shouting and we can't get we can't be our best selves. And I really feel it's because we have focused training on the external skills and haven't taken sufficient time for the person. How do I show up as my better self? Not every day, because every day is not Sunday, but when I can. Sometimes we take a day off for our better self. But how do I show up as my better self? And the only way I can do that is if I focus self-leadership first before leading others. We have to learn to lead ourselves first before we lead others. So this is what we're having tomorrow at 5:30, where we'll be looking at self-leadership, the leadership gap. We'll be looking at emotional intelligence, self-management. We're looking at SWOT analysis, that business tool that we didn't realize we could use for a personal development tool. So we will be doing a SWOT analysis. Each person will be doing a SWOT analysis. And at the end, we will be just an action plan to keep you going, which you will start to develop on the program. So it's short, it's packed. I have my spreadsheet packed. 3 hours, half 5 to half 8. Everybody's going to be sleeping. Half time. We'll have our breakout rooms. We have our music. We have our music to play.
Yes.
So it will be a fun Friday where we get to learn to be our better self and to be a better leader. Yeah.
That sounds absolutely awesome. So once again, Charlene, thank you for joining us. Guys, see us next week. But next week, we're going to be on Wednesday at 2 p.m. instead of Thursday, because we're also participating in another virtual expo that is going to be Thursday and Friday. So we're going to be on Wednesday at 2 p.m. and we're going to be doing our final session in the webinar series where we're going to be focusing on benchmarking. So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. And once again, Charlene, it was a privilege. Have a good one, everyone. Goodbye.
It was my pleasure. Bye-bye. Bye, folks.
Bye-bye.